So welcome, Sue and John, to the this afternoon session. So let's have a. Should we have a look at the lesson? It's a very short one today.
Yeah.
And then we'll do a meditation on it. So just going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, let's start with a quote. This was from Deepak Chopra, actually, but it could easily be a quote from A Course in Miracles. And I know Deepak has studied A Course in Miracles, so very much drawing on that. So he defines stress as the perception of physical or psychological threat, which is probably the most succinct definition of stress I've seen. It's just a perception of some kind of external threat, and that another name for which is fear. So fear and stress are really synonymous. It's very much the same thing. So we hear that stress is a killer and stress is the modern disease and stress affects so many people negatively. Well, it means that they're living in a state of fear most of the time.
Yeah.
And that creates the so-called stress. So it's always a looking to the future. Always involves the perception of some kind of threat. Generally, not right now. That's unusual. If you're in a crisis situation and actually there's an immediate threat to your life, that's a very unusual situation for most people. And often in that situation, people say, well, I went beyond that. I went into a very clear state and I was actually able to operate quite effectively because it brings them into the present moment, a bit like these extreme sportsmen. They go into danger and they have to be present because otherwise, they're just not going to be able to perform, or they might even die if it's, things like extreme climbing and stuff, free climbing. So that's not really what we're talking about here. It's just this underlying anxiety, the mind just continuously worrying about all kinds of things. Well, what if this goes wrong? What if this doesn't happen? What if this expectation really is not met? And always going into the future, never just being present now to this pure formless awareness. That's present in the now. So it's mind created. It's all about the mind, the mind creating this fear out of nothing. And then Jesus tells us in the lesson, well, there really is nothing to fear, in truth, because it's all an illusion. If you haven't watched this talk, it's this is an aside. It's really worthwhile. It's got Eckhart and Deepak and Wayne Dyer, which is the only talk I think they ever did together. It was kind of an accident actually, because it was Deepak and Eckhart Tolle, and then Wayne Dyer met Eckhart Tolle in a restaurant by chance the night before. And Eckhart said, "Oh, come along. We're doing this talk I'm doing with Deepak. Come along." So Wayne comes along. He's in the audience, and then they invite him on stage, and he has a chat about things like divine love, the three kinds of love, which was interesting. Ending up in divine love, synchronicities, flow, eternal time, fate. These are all spiritual topics, so it's worth listening to. And he'd studied a lot of the Eastern teachings. He'd studied A Course in Miracles, I know. He studied a lot of the Eastern teachings, like Muktananda and Bhagavad Gita and so on, and the Tao. He was big into the Tao De Jing as well. So yeah, that's definitely worth watching if you haven't.
Who's in the? Is that the three of them there?
Yeah.
Because that looks like a very young Wayne Dyer.
No, he was. I think this was 2013. So this was only a couple of years before he died.
Yeah, blimey.
He
Okay.
died in 2015. So
Yeah, very much worth watching that then. Yeah.
yeah. It's the only. I haven't seen another YouTube recording with three of them. Just I don't think it happened. So quite unusual. They all have their little bit to say. I enjoyed Wayne, I think, the most because I just enjoy his style. And they'd already done their. Well, you can listen to the whole thing, but I started at a point about 20 minutes in, and then Eckhart talks for a few minutes, Deepak, and then Wayne Dyer, talks for about 20 minutes. But you can watch the whole thing if you want to.
Right. Okay.
But that's definitely worth the watch. Okay, so moves us on to there's nothing to fear related to stress. All stress is just a perception of an external threat. In other words, it's fear. Something or someone is going to threaten my well-being. Often not right now, but in the future. So it's related to future time. And Jesus very simply just tells us that there's nothing to fear. It couldn't be a simpler lesson, really. You kind of go, is that it? But it is. That is it. You've just got to accept that. That's the hard part. There's nothing to fear when you have all these fears going on in your mind, is the denial of the ego. Okay, so only 3 paragraphs. Do you want to read the first one, John?
The idea for today simply states a fact. It is not a fact to those who believe in illusions, but illusions are not facts. In truth, there is nothing to fear. It is very easy to recognize this, but it is very difficult to recognize it for those who want illusions to be true.
Okay.
So he's saying here that for those who are in the world of illusion, who are illusion, they will perceive fear. That's fear exists in that domain, but not in the domain of spirit.
So it is a fact. There is nothing to fear because illusions are not true. Illusions are not facts. They are misperceptions. So in truth, in pure formless awareness, there's nothing to fear because there's only that presence, that awareness, that loving presence we call God. So it's very easy to recognize this. It's very difficult to recognize it for those who want illusions to be true. So what do you want to be true is what it comes down to. If you want this world to be true,
What's happening in that image, Joe? What's that child doing?
throwing a mask into a fire.
Ah,
It
oh, right.
symbolizes.
Oh, I see. Right.
It's symbolic of there's nothing to fear. I thought that was a good image to say. Well, I'm just I'm not going to honor my fear because the mask is symbolic of fear. Really, you fear that something's going to have having a threatening effect. So then you take protection. You have protection and you take defenses, which we'll get to. Lesson 135, if you recall, that's the longest lesson in the workbook. Is all about defenselessness. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. Because if you defend, then you make fear real.
Yeah.
So if there's really nothing to fear, then why are you taking defense if there's nothing to fear? You see, the ego says no, but there is something to fear. So you better take these defensive measures, which then of course makes the fear real in your mind. It's just that's obvious, except we overlook it all the time. Our world is based on the idea of fear and appropriate defenses to try and make us safe. And well, all it does is tie us up in knots of fear. Creates this, really, the stress, is this underlying anxiety, isn't it?
Hmm.
That's almost, the anxiety is the pandemic in this world. That underlying anxiety that so many people have. Well, everything's not quite right, and I live with this all the time. Just this anxious mind. It's never at peace, never settled. Anxiety is probably the modern plague, and it's not something you can necessarily just put your finger on. It's okay. Well, it's because of that. It's a way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's a way of perceiving the world, and so this is what he's trying to address here, saying, look, you've got to just accept this. There is nothing to fear. If you
So,
want illusions to be true, then you're going to struggle with this. But
so it's a good lesson for today, given the talk about chemical weapons in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, whatever's happening on the level of form, remember the ego's designed it precisely to engender fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. Lesson 13. The ego makes up these dreams to engender fear, and that's the only purpose. It's trying to pull us away from pure formless awareness, love, into the domain of fear. Oh no, well, that's to fear. Now there's chemical weapons, or nuclear war, or a COVID pandemic, or whatever it invents in the external world. You've got to start seeing, as a spiritual student and teacher, that it's just a setup. The whole point of the external world is to engender fear, and the only way out of this is this kind of unambiguous, very clear-cut decision. Okay, well, there is nothing to fear, because if I allow one fear, then I allow it all in. Well, if chemical weapons are real, then so is COVID, then so is sickness, suffering, death, all the misery of the world. And then indeed there's a lot to fear if I want to go there and believe in these illusions. So there's no halfway with this. That's why he's just saying it's a very clear-cut lesson, unambiguous. There is nothing to fear, and you just need to accept it. And you accept it fully, or you don't accept it at all. So, well, there's nothing to fear except chemical weapons in the Ukraine, or except COVID, or except whatever you fill in the blank. Well, then you make an exception and you justify the ego's entire thought system in that moment, which is not a very clever thing to do, because the ego, it wants to consume your mind. So if you give it any space in there, it's gonna try and expand that space. It's gonna try and say, oh, well, what about, well, if fear is justified in the case of the Ukraine war, then maybe it's also justified in terms of the COVID pandemic. And what about all the consequences of the pandemic? What about the economic consequences? Well, it's justified there too, and so it goes. If you want illusions to be true, that's what he's saying here, then you will make fear real. So it's impossible to recognize if you want illusions to be true. If you're not willing to let go of your mind's grip, attachment to, hold on this reality, then you won't be able to do this.
I mean, ultimately, the whole world is an illusion, isn't it? So,
yeah. So all it's designed to do, all these external appearances are designed to do, from the spiritual point of view, is to take your mind into a fearful state.
yeah.
Any negative, Jesus calls fear and love. So fear's the term for the ego. But that might manifest as guilt. It might manifest as attack thoughts, as fear directly, anxiety, anger, rage, jealousy. Whatever it is, it's moving you away from pure formless awareness. Your pure formless awareness in that moment is denied.
So why should we actually care about the planet at all then? I mean,
well, you the truth be told, you want to leave it behind. So you're trying to let it go in your perception. You're not trying to save the world in the sense of, oh well, we want to preserve preserve the planet for future generations. We want to make it a better place. We want to make heaven on earth. There's all these kinds of ideas. That makes the dream real, doesn't it? And it seems like it doesn't matter what we do to try and make that happen. There's many people with good intentions. It seems like there's always this opposite force that's trying to destroy it. Very destructive. It's a very destructive planet, because that's the nature of the dream, right? Remember, the dream was born out of a death wish. What else could you expect from a death wish but death? So, truth be told, the planet is doomed. At some point, in the future, it's going to cease to exist. The sun, that might take 1 billion years, but the sun's going to go into a supernova at some point, and the whole planet's going to be incinerated. So it's doomed anyway. So why are you trying to save what is not savable? I'm just going to open. Let's see if I can see my cursor. I'm going to open the. Can't really see the cursor. So. I'm trying to open this LG. There we go.
Your cursor's up in the.
Cursor's up in the top left. Yeah. Okay.
Down,
there we
bottom left now.
Yeah, I can see it now. Okay. There we go. So you've got to put this in true perspective. Jesus, when he says you save the world, it doesn't mean save the material world, save the earth, preserve it for future generations. He means save the mind. Save the mind of the Son of God, which is all of us, and restore it to its true awareness, which means that you transcend this whole place. He's not saying try and save the ego's world and its projections. The world, the universe, it's all part of an insane thought system, a projection of fear outwards, guilt, sin, fear, attack. These are what characterize the ego's world. And he's just asking us to see it for what it is and say, look, this is a nightmare. This is hell. And you don't want this. You want to transcend this entirely and go back to pure formless awareness. So, if you're trying to save the world on the level of form, it's misdirected. What it is another attempt by the ego to make its world real. And then, therefore, to justify fear. So there's many people who go on, crusades and causes to I want to save the world. We want world peace, and we want to save the planet from humanity's destructive forces. We're destroying the natural world. We want to preserve this, but it's delusional, because in the end you're trying to preserve what cannot be preserved. It's destructible by its nature, and it is going to be destroyed at some point. So it's very temporary. Why not take your mind out of the entire dream and back to what's eternal, to what you can really trust, that never changes? And then while you're here, you'll tend to treat the planet a lot better from that perspective. If there's no harm, you're in this harmless state, the ahimsa state, that characterizes enlightened beings. Then you're not going to do the things that the ego does. You're not going to try and kill and destroy and misuse nature's resources, because there's no desire to do that. You're in your true awareness, in your beingness, and from that perspective, you don't need to do any of those destructive things. It doesn't make sense to do those destructive things. You recognize that you are one with all life, so why would you try and harm anything when it's you? The essence of it is you. It's your essence. So from that universal oneness, universal love, we will take good care of whatever happens to be here on the level of form. That's a planet, that's a garden that we're in charge of. You know, we bring our love into that. And so it just takes care of itself. You're not trying to save the world. You're not trying to save the form of it and going, because the danger of that, you know, if you say, well, I want to save the world, then there's always this perception of, oh, well, it's being destroyed, isn't it? Got to save it from the destruction. So now we've got to reverse this. We've got to defend against these, you know, evil forces that are destroying the world. And so you split your mind into a very dualistic thought system just by doing that. Does that make sense?
Well, I think what you're saying is that if we start from the principle of oneness, then we actually want to preserve the world.
Well, you wouldn't want to preserve it because you're not attached to the form of it, but you honor the essence, the life essence that is in everything. It's not about preservation. It's about honoring the eternal spirit, the eternal life essence in everything.
Yeah.
So if you really see that and you feel that, then how can you harm anything? Why would you want to harm anyone or anything if you really see and you feel that this is one with you?
Yeah.
Because then it's obvious to you in that state that you're harming yourself. And in the harm, you separate yourself from your own true awareness, your own oneness, which is not a clever thing to do as you start to realize at those levels. This isn't a smart thing. So, you know, as I love others, I love myself. As I give to them, I give to myself. If I attack them, then I attack myself. It becomes self-evident to the spiritually enlightened person. And then they just don't do that anymore. They stop doing all the ego's destructive things because it just really doesn't make any sense. They see it as the insane thought system that it is. And then they just don't do that. And if everyone didn't do that, you know, we would change the way the world works. People would be having different thoughts, making different decisions, behaving differently, acting differently towards each other, towards the planet, and we would create a different system. So if you look at you know, the integral model, if everyone was in a unity consciousness in the interior individual aspect, so and they really understood, you know, I am one with life. I'm not separate from anyone or anything. This life essence is my life essence. Well, then how can I want to harm anything or destroy anything? Just that doesn't make any sense at all. From that perspective, from that intention, shall we say, to honor life and life only, which is source, that would translate into behavior. And if enough people do it, those behaviors become systematized, and we create new systems, patterns of behavior, which come out of that awareness of this truth of, you know, universal love. The systems and the behavior that largely we see on this planet come out of the ego, so they don't work very well. It's all very disconnected, discombobulated, it's confusing, there's lots of contradictions, and nothing really integrates and flows. So, you know, as Jesus says, you know, seek not to change the world, but seek to change your mind about the world. So he's pointing us into the individual interior and saying, change your mind, right? Change your values, change your attitudes, change your beliefs, change your perceptions. That's what you can change. And then the exterior will change of its own accord. Your life starts to change. You start to become a miracle worker. You're truly helpful in the at-one-ment process. And you're guided accordingly to help others. And, you know, this is the best way we can serve others and the whole planet, which is really just all the life forms on the planet that seem to live here. Well, if we're all one life, and I honor that, and I really express that in my behavior, then I'm going to be doing the best thing I possibly can to nurture life. So instead of trying to preserve life, we honor life, we respect life. You see the subtle difference between that?
Yeah, I do actually, yeah.
If I say I preserve life There's a fear that life is going to be destroyed by the word preserve. You're saying, oh well, actually it's destructible. So then you bring the ego in, the thought system of death. It says, well, actually this is very destructible, and now you've got to try and defend it against the destructive forces, and that makes fear then real in your perception. And he's saying, no, we've got to go beyond this. We need to go beyond fear entirely. Just close that. Okay. So I'm happy with paragraph 1.
Go with that.
Okay. All right. So paragraph 2, Sue, if you want to read that.
Paragraph 2 is really just about the practice. Do you want me to read it?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you can skip that. He's just saying, this is how to do it, and particularly important to use the idea, should anything disturb your peace of mind. So use this as an immediate correction to whatever disturbance.
Repeat the idea as often as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to read number 3 then?
The presence of fear is a sure sign that you are trusting in your own strength. The awareness that there is nothing to fear shows that somewhere in your mind, though not necessarily in a place you recognize as yet, you have remembered God, love, pure formless awareness, and let its strength take the place of your weakness. The instant you are willing to do this, there is indeed nothing to fear.
Okay. So anything stand out for you there?
It's a useful signpost. If you feel fear, it's a sure sign that you're trusting in your own strength. Thing to notice and out.
Yeah. Because remember, the previous lesson was about not trusting in your own strength, trusting in the strength of God instead. We trusted our own strength. So that's too often what we try and do. We say, well, we'll save the world. Like our egos will save the world. And of course, that's delusional. The ego's created the problem in the first place. How can it solve the problem it's created? As Einstein said, the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So, presence of fear is a sure sign that you're trusting in your own strength, in other words, your own ego, to try and solve the apparent problems. And of course, it's not going to do that. It created the problem. So it's going to get you more and more wrapped up in problems, problem solving, and all of its activities is a favorite ego device for distracting you from the truth. And if you think, what human civilization has done, we've spent the majority of our time and energy trying to solve problems on the level of form, haven't we?
Yeah.
Our civilization is based. Okay, what's the problem there? Okay, well, we'll invent something. Someone will come up with a good idea. We've got a solution for that. Someone's got a solution, and so then we call that technology. And we're supposedly progressing.
And then it creates more problems.
Yeah, creates more problems. Exactly. So okay, so no, we'll be very clever and we'll invent something called plastic because we have a problem of transporting goods. So we'll invent this thing called plastic, and then, oh dear, this is an environmental disaster. Now we've got
Can't
plastic
ever get rid of it.
Now we can't get rid of it. Oh, another problem. Oh, okay. Now we've got to create some kind of solution for the plastic in the world. And if they ever do, then that becomes its own problem probably. So this is magic. The ego's trying to solve problems on the level that it created them, on the level of form, and really, we're just spinning around in the problem.
Yeah.
And not really going anywhere. So although technology is supposedly advanced, we now have these incredible devices like phones, computers. This computing power is extraordinary. has anything really changed compared with, say, Jesus' time 2,000 years ago, in terms of the mind, the fundamental nature of human mind? People are still stressed, they're still anxious, they're still unhappy, possibly more so than ever in history. I'd say there's probably more unhappiness maybe now than ever before on the planet. Maybe not. That's a difficult to say, and there's no way of telling. But it doesn't seem like our society's happy, does it?
No.
And it didn't sound like a very happy society 2,000 years ago either, when the society he was living in. So has anything really changed? The fundamental nature of mind? Yes, we've got much more advanced technology. We can do many more things. We can communicate across the world instantly like this. We can get on planes and we can fly to the opposite side of the world within 24 hours. Woohoo! And the ego is, oh, this is progress. But it's only progress in time and space on the level of form. So what you can do in the world, but in terms of the mind, are we really progressing? Or are we just staying stuck in the same dream? Better technology, and now the danger of it is that the ego goes, oh well, this is okay. We'll make the world better. So forget pure formless awareness, forget God, and let's follow my direction, and I'll help you to make this world better. We'll make heaven on earth, and that's just a delusion. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It never has happened, and it never will happen. The ego's world, once you understand this framework, you understand that the ego will never allow that to happen. The ego's world is designed as it is to create suffering, sickness, suffering, and death, because that is what's part of separation. You cannot have a separate identity without the suffering. So it's entrenched in the world, and that's why it doesn't seem to matter what humanity does. There's always suffering, and a lot of it in every generation, every age. There's suffering, and it just continues. And so Jesus is saying, okay, well, let's just look at this honestly, and just be willing to be done with all of it, and say, look, there's really nothing to fear. It's a non-dual statement. If there's nothing to fear, then none of this exists. You see, so these lessons just point us always back to the truth of the non-existence of the ego in a very clear, unambiguous way. If the thought of separation is not true, then fear doesn't exist. None of its consequences are true. Only love is real. This is the fundamental principle, and that's the only principle that will save you. It will save your mind from the belief in all of this, which is a very, very unhappy world. As you said at some point recently, said, how could you escape from how could you be happy in a joyless place? How could you find joy in a joyless place except by realizing that you're not there? It's like the logic is impeccable, but it's just to remember it when you're in the dream. It seems to be real. You seem to have a body. Seems to be all this stuff going on. I'm sitting in a garden. We go, oh, isn't this beautiful? Oh, lovely tree, lovely. And of course, the mind wants to make it real. The form of it. What really makes it beautiful is the essence of it. It's not the form. The form of anything is very temporary, and ultimately will die. But there is a life essence, and you can feel it in nature. There's something there. There's a presence, isn't there? And that's what's really the beauty. So it activates that in you, and then you feel it, and you feel expanded, because you're connecting with the very essence of life in yourself. And so that's where he's asking us to go, because in that presence, in that essence, there's nothing to fear, because there's only that. We're acknowledging only God, and everything else is not real in our perception. And then you can appreciate the temporary forms. You can go, what a garden, and I feel the life essence, feel the breeze on my skin now. Yeah, there's a kind of a life flowing through. This life force flows through, and I can appreciate that without attaching to form. Oh, I want the form of the garden to stay. Is this still going to be here in 10 years? or what if my parents die, which they're going to at some point in the next few years. And then the form of this changes, you see. So, but you don't go there. You're just in the moment and going, well, I'm enjoying the essence of it right now, and that's all that matters. Moment by moment by moment, without any conception of future, of, oh, this is potentially not going to be there, it's potentially going to be threatened. I'm just like, you're just in the now. And then there's nothing to fear. Because you're in that essence, you're in that presence, you're connected to it. And that essence, this presence denies all fear. Just fear is irrelevant. Fear is not true. So that's where he's trying to take us, with a very simple lesson. And really just 3 paragraphs, but it's a profound lesson. There is nothing to fear. If you reminded yourself of that, over and over, which is today's lesson, you can start coming into the awareness of this. And, well, there's nothing to fear. So the instant you're willing to do this, then there is indeed nothing to fear. You've remembered the instant you're willing to do this, where there's nothing to fear, shows it's somewhere in your mind, though not necessarily in a place you recognize as yet. You have remembered God or love or awareness.
I think we've got it, John.
Okay. And let its strength take the place of your weakness. So, shall we do a meditation on it? What's the timing? Yeah. So you want to go in half an hour. So we'll do a 25-minute med, and then.
John, I'd rather get on with the text.
Oh, okay. Then we have to stop and break.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, because then I'll just do it as 2 recordings. If we do the meditation, then it goes with the lesson. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay, so just making yourself comfortable. Sitting with your feet shoulder width apart. Back straight, cup your hands in your lap. Close your eyes. Start off by taking a nice deep breath in through the nose. So breathing in, noticing how the stomach rises and the chest rises. Subtle flow of air in through the nostrils. Clenching the sphincter muscle, locking the energy in. Drawing the energy up. Spine into the heart center. You can put one hand on your heart. And draw it all the way up into the crown of your head. Just pausing at the top of the inhale. Smile. Now check in, scan your mind. Notice any fear thoughts. So it could be a little bit of anxiety about something trivial. It could be something deep-seated. It could be about the war in the Ukraine, chemical weapons, COVID, and whatever's causing you any kind of mental and emotional disturbance to your peace. You notice how that feels. Kind of feels tight, contracted, constricted, so just be aware of that. Breathe into it again to create some space. Just bring in spacious awareness with your breath. If it helps, you can imagine you breathing light into wherever there's contraction in your body. If you notice, say, a knot in your stomach, breathe into that. Imagine light flowing into your stomach like a light-filled balloon. Feel that light in your heart center rising up into the crown of your head. Maximal inhale breath. And so in this spacious awareness that is the light, just observe this thought. That's all it is. And an emotion. It's a feeling in your body, sensation in your body. Remind yourself of today's very simple idea that there really is nothing to fear. What you're perceiving with the body's eyes and with the senses is not true. It's an illusion. It's a projection of the mind. It's designed to confuse you into believing that this is reality. So if you're fearing the illusion, then you're fearing falsely. All fear is really false evidence and false expectations appearing real. So just acknowledge the logic of this. It's impeccable logic. And now, as you exhale, just blow it all out. Blowing this fear away like a dark smoke. Imagine it's leaving you. Just expelling out of your mouth to the nothingness that it really is. Blowing it all away with the breeze of your breath. Pull the lower stomach into the spine. Expel the last remaining air out. And just rest here for a few moments in the peace and the stillness that comes when you really do let go and you realize there's nothing to fear. Jesus says, the presence of fear is a sure sign that you're trusting your own strength. The awareness that there's nothing to fear shows that somewhere in your mind, not necessarily in a place you recognize as yet, you have remembered God or love or pure formless awareness, and that its strength take the place of your weakness. So feel that presence now, just sink into it. Love, pure formless awareness, arising in your mind. Fear is just a block to that awareness. That's its only purpose, it's its only meaning. Ego's made it up to prevent you from experiencing this awareness, to keep you away from God, to keep you in its thought system, to keep you under its sway. And the world was set up to perpetuate this enslavement. So there's nothing to fear, simply frees you from it, frees you from the bondage of fear forever. To recognize the profundity of the lesson, just breathing in and out through your nose. And remind yourself just a few times as you breathe, there is nothing to fear. And then pause, just be still, be quiet. Observe this pure formless awareness, this presence of love itself beyond all fear, arising in your mind, in your heart, in your whole body as a felt sense. There is nothing to fear. And just sink in for a few minutes to the presence that arises when you really accept this deeply. There's nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, nothing else to think about, nothing to fear. Just be in the presence of God or love or pure formless awareness. Presence that lies beyond fear. Surrender to that presence for the next few minutes of deep silence. And if any thoughts arise, particularly any fear thoughts, little concerns, little scrap of anxiety, notice it. Observe it casually. It's just like a cloud. It's a cloud just drifting by in your awareness. Observe it and just let it go. With the breeze of your breath as you exhale, feel a release. Remind yourself that this is not real. This appearance, this cloud pattern is not real. It's not true. It's an illusion. It's designed to obscure the truth of your pure formless awareness, the blue sky that is eternally clear, eternally bright. The light of your source shines through it. So in this clear blue sky of your pure formless awareness, illuminated by the light of your source, there is indeed nothing to fear. The cloud patterns have no meaning, have no effect on this domain. So just blow them away with the breeze of your breath. So they're just going, gone. And this awareness, pure formless awareness, light, sense of lightness in your mind shining through. Just feel that, experience that, fully sink into it. To this domain beyond fear, domain of pure formless awareness where there's nothing to fear. For another few minutes of deep silence. And so gently coming back in this deep state, pure formless awareness, which hopefully you experienced, you touched it, and you bring some awareness back into body and senses, and via the senses into the apparent world, the external world. And on the count of 3, you're going to open your eyes. So 1, just breathing in, noticing how the stomach rises and the chest rises. A subtle flow of air in through the nostrils. Just pausing at the top of the inhale. Smile. Again, scan your mind. Notice any thoughts, any emotions, any sensations going on. Notice any scraps of fear that remain. Fear just shows up as a little disturbance in the mind, a contraction, maybe a fleeting sensation, a contraction in your stomach. Just pick up all these scraps now and be willing to let them all go. Just throw them all away. Reminding yourself that there really is nothing to fear in this or any situation. Fear is not justified in any form. It's another course lesson we'll get to later in the year. So blow it all out. There's nothing to fear. Just release that thought, the emotion, the energy of it, like a dark cloud, blowing it away with the breeze of your breath to the nothingness that it really is. Just revealing the blue sky of your pure formless awareness beyond the cloud patterns. Allow stomach into the spine, expel the last remaining air out. Rest here for a few moments. The bottom of the exhale in the peace and the stillness of your own pure formless awareness that lies beyond fear. Smile because it feels so good just to be here now, to be in this presence, to rest in the presence of your own pure formless awareness beyond fear. Smile. And on the count of 2, you're going to notice the weight of your body pressing down into the chair, your feet touching the ground. Notice any subtle flow of air on your skin perhaps. Breathe that air in. Notice the air flowing into the nostrils, the chest and the stomach rise. Notice any taste in your mouth perhaps. Notice any smell in your nose as you breathe in. Notice what you're hearing. Whatever the sounds are in the surrounding environment, you just allow them to be. And when you do that, you access stillness. Become aware of stillness, silence, which is how pure formless awareness shows up in the world. It's the silence within which all these perceptions happen, that underlies these perceptions. So underneath every sound is silence. Sound arises within silence, and then it subsides, and then there's silence again. So these things come and go, they shift and change. Sense perceptions are always changing. They rise and pass away. That is their nature. They are impermanent, illusory. But silence, stillness, is a reflection of pure formless awareness in this world. This is eternal. This does not change. This is where this lesson is pointing. There's nothing to fear because there is only this pure formless awareness in truth. So, on the count of 3, you're going to open your eyes. Just take a minute to look around in this still very connected state. You're back fully in sense perceptions now, seeing with your visual sense, but notice that this awareness is still there. So look at a few objects randomly. Just notice them without any judgment or interpretation. And you'll notice that the same awareness that was there when your eyes were closed, in the deepest part of your meditation, and when you came out and you started being aware of your other senses, now with your visual sense, it's the same awareness. Maybe experienced slightly differently because you've got your eyes open. So apparently you see a world around you, but that awareness is the same. It's ever present. So just anchor that awareness into your awareness by acknowledging it. Carry it with you until our next session, which we'll start at, shall we start it at 2:30 your time? Does that work for you?
In theory, that should work, Jono. Well, I'll do it anyway. So 2:30, yes.
2:30. Okay, I'll log on again then. All right. See you shortly.
Really good, that meditation. I got the message actually that there is nothing to fear, because and part of that is that we are connected with all of life, and no matter what happens, that will remain.
Yeah. So nothing on the level of form really affects that. The essence, the life essence remains the life essence, undisturbed, whatever's happening on the level of form. Because what happens on the level of form is the distortion of that life essence. It's the ego is then taking that life essence and going, oh, well, I'll do this with it, and I'll put it into form, and I'll make it into a form of life which is now destructible, which will fade and die. Then we attach to the form, and then fear is inevitable.
And I see the difference. I see the difference between responding or reacting to negative news and doing something, compared to feeling inspired to doing something.
Yeah. So one is based on fear of loss, and the other one's based on connection with life essence. It's saying, I'm only going to see that. I'm not trying to preserve the form. I'm just feeling the inspiration and the love, and it wants to extend through me.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's subtle, but it's very profoundly different in terms of how you're going to feel and how you're going to act. And inspiration beats egoic motivation every time.
Yeah.
Just the ego cannot compete against the power of inspiration, because it's truly miraculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much akin to the the initial tiny mad idea of separation. If you accept, once you accept the idea of separation, you are and responding from that place.
Yeah, and then fear is real, and it doesn't matter what you do to try and fix it. You're never going to fix it, because the fundamental premise is not being questioned. You assume separation is true. Oh, now we're trying to fix the effects of the separation that's not true. Well, as he says at some point, you cannot cure the effects of the problem, because the problem is not real.
Yeah.
You got yourself into an impossible situation, and the only way out of it is just clear logic. Like, okay, this is not possible. It's not real, it's not possible. So let me drop the premise, which is that I'm separate. And then all of the effects of fear and everything else just fall away. Separation isn't true. So that's where he's taking us, with a simple, few words. There is nothing to fear.
Yeah.
He's taking us back into the non-dual presence of moments awareness. Okay.
Okay.
See you in just over half an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.